Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Possessky. I am the board chair for DC Refers. I want to welcome you to our program today, and as we have our pro bono week this week in DC. Our program today is entitled Revisiting AI in the Law, Progress, Pitfalls, and the Path Forward. And so today I'm very pleased to have with me three colleagues from across the legal services community in DC to talk with us about artificial intelligence. And we will explore how AI is currently shaping the legal services practice, touching both efficiencies gained as well as some ethical complexities that are navigated, the benefits and the challenges. And so to get started, let me first of all thank the Washington Council of Lawyers for collaborating with us and hosting us today with this program. And let me introduce our panel. Angela Tripp is the Program Officer for Technology at the Legal Services Corporation. Michael Lukens, who's the Executive Director of the Amica Center for Immigration Rights and is also a Washington Council of Lawyers board member. And my colleague, David Greisen, who's on the DC Refers board with me and is also the Chief Executive Officer and founding board member of Open Law Library. So I want to welcome all of you to our program today. Um, you know, last year we had a panel and we talked about artificial intelligence and what the promise and perils might be of adapting AI in the practice of law and particularly as it relates to legal services. And a lot has happened over the course of the past year. So I thought we would start off by just talking a bit about some of the developments that have happened and how AI use has evolved over the past year and perhaps to the extent that it's been integrated into some of your work on a daily basis. And Angela, I think I would turn to you first and just ask you kind of what's your take? What are you seeing in your role and what's happening and how it's being used on the ground?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here to talk about this. I wasn't here last year, so I don't know what all you discussed last year, but I can say that from my role at LSC, I have a lot of opportunity to see what types of technology innovation legal aid programs are doing. I am part of a four-person team that oversees all of our technology initiative grants. For those of you who may not be familiar, part of our budget includes $5 million a year to give in grants to legal aid programs, LSC funded legal aid programs for technology innovation projects. We also hold an annual Innovation and Technology Conference. It's in January of every year. And we receive, I think this year we got about 150 panel proposals. Of things that people want to talk about and share with their colleagues. So through these, I have learned a lot about what programs are doing with AI, and I can confirm that it has changed drastically in the last year. At LSC, we decided to start a project called the AI Peer Learning Labs. We started it at the beginning of this year, but it really kicked off in May or so. And one of the things that we did as part of that process was we did a survey and we asked people, what's your personal level of comfort with AI? What's your organization's openness to AI? What's your organization's adoption of AI? And these are all kind of 5-point scales from not much to a lot. And then what barriers do you see? And what we learned was that generally, people's personal experience was all over the map, but their organizational openness was a nice bell curve, kind of trending toward organizations being open to the idea. However, the adoption was the opposite. It was a downward line, showing that not very many organizations were actually doing much in terms of adoption. And the barriers really tell the story. People are concerned about accuracy and hallucinations. People are concerned with confidentiality, and people really didn't know where to start. They felt that they lacked the knowledge to really do anything substantial. One thing that we didn't think to include, but that we realized is another huge barrier, is that in general, legal aid advocates don't have the time to devote to learning about this new technology and how it might impact them, um, because they're busy, putting out fires every day. And so these are some of the barriers that we're trying to eliminate with our peer learning labs. And we've had really great presentations. The idea is that we bring together folks because there are people innovating and experimenting and learning a lot of lessons. And we bring them and have them talk about their work and their philosophies around AI and what they've done and how they did it. We also bring in, we have a strategic leadership one lab where we bring in leaders to talk about how they have created a culture of innovation and how they've structured their staff's workloads to be able to give them this time and effort to experiment and learn. As a result, we have seen a real growth in adoption. The projects tend to fall into four categories. The first one is sort of AI in internal operations. This might look like AI generated videos that they use for training or onboarding to make the videos more easily edited, to deal with changes to processes. Um, a program in Texas has created an internal legal research chatbot. Rather than their advocates looking in 5 different places to do legal research on something like eviction, they created an LLM with their curated resources that they want people to use, and so now it exists, and they can ask research questions, get answers that cite to the source materials that helps them do that more quickly and easily. And they build similar chatbots around HR and IT policies so that people can get answers 24/7 to things like, how much bereavement time do I get if my stepmother dies? Um, we're also seeing experimentation in agentic AI for back office work, using agentic AI to make it easier to manage grants, finances, and things like that. And I'm imagining we'll see a lot more of that in the near future. The second category is in legal work and client communications. Lots of folks use generative AI to help with writing and transcribing meetings and doing first rounds of translation. But in addition to that, a program in Maryland built a brief generator that that they use to write appellate briefs to reduce the time it takes to get that first draft. And they, use the curated materials of the relevant case law and the relevant briefs and the hearing transcripts. And what is produced is very much a first draft, but at least it gives their staff more time to focus on, honing their legal arguments, working on the really important parts of the brief, because the like generic part has already been written and they don't have to worry about, formatting the table of contents and things like that. They also built a um, uh,
Mhm. Like,
they also built a housing ledger analysis tool that takes very messy and problematic rent ledgers and helps analyze them to find the errors and mistakes. And advocates have found that really useful with the huge eviction docket that they have. Not needing, being able to analyze those ledgers more quickly and accurately has been a real boon. Um, Another area is connecting people to legal information, and these are often the self-represented litigants that aren't able to be helped by lawyers at legal aid and other programs. A big favorite is the public-facing chatbot. And I say that with a giant asterisk, and that it's very popular and talked about, but it is also, in my mind, one of the most uh, I don't want to say dangerous, but one of the most complicated tools to build and launch, because when we talk about AI, we always talk about the importance of the human in the loop. And all of the tools that I've talked about so far, the humans in the loop are the legal aid staff themselves. But when you have a public-facing chatbot, the human in the loop is a layperson with no legal knowledge who has come here because they don't know what to do. And so to do a public-facing chatbot really well, it takes a whole lot of time. It takes a lot of strong foundational material and a lot of work testing and analyzing the results of the chatbot to ensure that people are getting accurate information, useful information, actionable information, and not just today, but tomorrow and the next day and the next day. My favorite example of a public-facing chatbot comes from British Columbia, a tool called Beagle Plus. If you want to look into it, you can see how it works. And the thing that I really appreciate about the folks at Beagle Plus is they did an incredible amount of systematic testing for accuracy and helpfulness. They reviewed more than 7,000 of the conversations that the chatbot had. And, when they found issues, they would tweak source material, they would change prompts. Um, and in the end, they're able to say that their product is 99% of the conversations are legally accurate. And users of the tool report that 79% of them thought it was helpful and they liked engaging with it, which is, when you think about people's opinions of lawyers, it's pretty good. The fourth area of where we're seeing use of generative AI is in hotlines and intake processes, which are very complex for legal aid programs, trying to figure out how to help as many people as possible while making the best use of their limited resources. What generative AI is looking like in intake and hotlines. First, we're seeing several kind of internal facing chatbots. So chatbots for the hotline staff that help them be sure to give the correct legal information, but also to really help them make the most accurate referrals. Um, Especially something like a statewide hotline, knowing where to send someone in a particular county over here is impossible to keep just in your brain. So having these resources enables them to more quickly get the best answers for clients on the hotline. There are also ways that programs are using generative AI to help in triage. There's a tool in Tennessee, nope, sorry, um, uh, Missouri, that where four legal aid programs got together to build a triaging tool so that anyone in the state could use the tool, and it's specifically around housing. And the tool it does some kind of basic sort of online intake information gathering, like income and where they live. And then it asks them and a few open-ended question, kind of what's going on, and it asks tailored follow-up questions. And the AI tool compares what the answers that the end user gives to the case acceptance criteria of the particular program that covers the end user's service area, and is able to say, yes, this is a case that's likely to get help from legal aid, and it then advises the person to do a full online intake application with that organization, or if not, it then refers them to some self-help resources. And this again went through thorough testing, and then it compared the answers that the tool generated with answers that an intake manager, which cases would the intake manager accept. And what they found was the mistakes that were made were very common to what a human might make, and the mistakes were always erring on the side of caution, which is referring the client to the legal aid program in cases where it wasn't 100% clear. Um, the last example that I'll talk about is very, very new active voice AI a lot of programs are exploring this potential for intakes, using the voice AI to do the initial information gathering stages of an intake, to reserve the time of skilled intake workers to do kind of the next stage of the intake process, following up with the client, getting the more detailed information about the case to help the legal aid program understand what the needs are and what the next steps for this client should be. So this is just a handful of the examples that we're seeing, but it's been very interesting, and also hearing, along with kind of the interesting, exciting use cases, people talk about their organizational philosophy around AI and how they're using it not to replace people or to just generate higher numbers of people served, but to really eliminate some of the drudgery, the repetitive work that legal aid that you have to do in the practice of law, allowing their staff more time to connect with clients, do the more meaningful work, do the more important work, and having some of the administrative stuff be
That's
managed
that's
otherwise.
terrific. Angela, thank you so much for that. That's a really terrific overview. And I just want to mention for all of you who are live with this program, if you have questions or comments, to feel free to populate those in the chat so that the speakers and I can get a sense of any comments or questions that you have as we're talking. Angela, what I basically heard you say is that organizations and people in legal services across the country have found ways to integrate AI into their daily practices to help with legal research, to
Oh,
basically function as a paralegal, to help with the intake
yeah,
and
we gotta go
referral
back.
process, and a number of like backroom tasks and operations, as well as exploring new ways that the technology can help support the daily work, including things like brief writing. So that's amazing, and it feels like this is potentially a game changer for legal services in many ways. Yet at the same time, I think that there are also a lot of challenges. One of the things that you had mentioned was, potentially hesitation because the unwillingness or perhaps more so the lack of time to kind of get in and really learn the technology and learn how it works, but also maybe some hesitation that if we get too reliant on it, it might actually replace jobs. Michael, I was wondering if I could turn to you and just kind of provide some discussion on some of the use cases that you've seen where we've had some challenges with AI and how people are kind of moving through these challenges as they arise.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks everyone for being here. So I don't think it's a surprise to anybody on the call that there have been a number of high profile, well, I guess high profile if you're in this, if you're following AI news, high profile issues that have arisen where lawyers have used AI to generate material that would go in front of an adjudicator. The most recent, there was a California case just late summer where an attorney was fined $10,000 by a California court for using ChatGPT for writing a brief. The AI system generated 21 fake quotes and citations, and this gentleman decided he didn't need to read his brief before it went to the court. Um, and it's interesting that despite the number of ethical warnings, ethical rules, a lot of jurisdictions now have ethics rules on this that say do not use AI to generate documents that are going in front of an adjudicator or going to a government entity. It still happens. There's probably a different conversation about the pace of legal work, but that's for a different a different webinar. So, we are seeing in the nonprofit sector and having conversations with our peer groups around the country, how can we use AI? I will say that at Amica Center, we have a strict policy that nothing that goes in front of a government official, an immigration judge, can start with or end with using AI. Our staff are using AI in some really interesting ways. To Angela's point, a lot of it is about saving time so we can spend that time being advocates. The a group is looking at how do we use AI to make our timesheets better and easier because we bill time to the government and we want to be accurate. So things like that. But I will say that to your point about replacing jobs, we're in the middle of negotiating a collective bargaining agreement, and luckily it is an incredibly friendly process. But we had an interesting conversation about would AI eventually replace legal service advocates and whether a union agreement should bar the use of AI. And we started talking, and that if an agreement is for 3 years, 3 years ago, ChatGPT had just come out, right? So who knows what the next 3 years is going to look like? And I can envision I am probably probably one of the few people here who had to learn how to use books in law school to do legal research and not just like, those are books. That's what old people used to use. Like, I actually had to learn how to cite check through a book. Um, I would imagine there's going to be a point where just like you had to use Westlaw and Lexis to be ethical, you're going to have to use some sort of AI version of something to be ethical. But that is far in the future, I think. What we talked about internally was that one of the major issues with AI replacing, and why I don't think it will ever replace, is that we are not just robots to recitate facts or citations, right? We have to strategically think about our client's case, our client's goals, and how do we advocate for those. It is not something I think you can teach an AI system, and maybe in the future you can, but what judge do you have? What does that judge like to see in the briefings? How does your client's goals line up with the facts that you have? And what can you fight for and not fight for? So to me, the idea of replacing advocates is, hopefully never going to happen. But it's also something I think we all need to be aware of, both from an ethics perspective and from the future of our work perspective.
Michael, I was going to ask you too, and this may be also open to Angela and David, other challenges that I think, I certainly have heard, and I know we've discussed at DC Refers as well, is, what programs to use, right? There's a lot of vendors out there that offer the sun, the moon, and the stars. We can make this perfect for you. Any kind of cautionary words of wisdom on that front?
Yeah, so my caution is to do what I'm going to do, which is to ask somebody who is smarter than me on these issues when someone pitches me something. So I'm going to kick it over to David because I think if you don't know, you should be asking someone who does know.
Yeah, so I'm definitely don't know everything about all this. I've been looking at a lot of different AI tools over the last year, and I think you have the 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 AI tool companies are able to differentiate themselves along the size of their models and the data that they're able to provide to those models to make decisions. Um, there are a lot. I still feel like there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to put themselves apart by saying that they're somehow more confidential or things like that. And this is my own uh, personal quest, but like you should make them put their money where their mouth is if they're talking about like fulfilling some of your ethical obligations. They should be indemnifying you. Other than that, you should be looking really at the data sets that they have and how modern their LLM models are. Don't know if
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
helpful.
100%. And like, and one of the other the ethical concerns, as well, is if there are free versions of Chat GPT and Claude and a lot of other AI tools, and I think it's just really important to remember that um, a lot of these AI tools really drive their power from the data that's inputted into them. And so one of the challenges to balance is one, first of all, when you're putting that data in, you got to be careful because you may don't want to be putting in information that might be confidential for clients or otherwise, or might even be able to, through that data, infer something specific about the client situation. There's some parameters, and I think we're gonna, as the tools come into more frequent use, figure out ways to move through that. One of the ways to sidestep that, of course, is to have some kind of proprietary tool that offers safeguards on that front. But I know, I certainly have seen from my role in the AI task force for the American Bar Association, where we've looked at the broad impact on this in the legal profession, is that ethical piece. I think it's a big, big issue. Um, but also to be aware that a lot of these vendors will you know use the information and will offer and be offered to do certain things, and it may not be the best framework. I know, David, you and I have talked, and one of the things that I think that you've indicated is that a lot of the companies that have offered to do things, hey, we can build this AI tool for you to do X. You've got to kind of really make sure, as Michael's pointing out, make sure you've got somebody in the loop that really understands what's going on with that, because they may be asking you to provide all of the information that you're inputting as part of their training sets to train the data. But they also, may be doing something relatively simple that you potentially, through less expensive or other circumstances, basically create your own prompts. Like, prompt engineering is the process of being able to designate how you get at information. So you really kind of have to make sure you've got somebody on your side that understands how that all comes together. Plus the fact that there's so many in the market, right? I mean, David, you and I were talking about the economic um, components, that there's so many businesses kind of entering this and they're not making money. So the risk is they
Yeah,
may go away, right?
your data might be safe while they're still a going concern, but a lot can happen during a buyout or during bankruptcy to your
The
data.
the, the 23andMe problem. Everybody
Yes.
thought their
Exactly.
data, yeah, and then it went bankrupt. And also, and I know this is maybe just because I am a bit of a conspiracy nut, but some of these companies are also building out very insidious AI tools for law enforcement, ICE, etc.
That's
So
excellent.
thinking about, I mean, I'm sure in your contract, if you were to sign it with them, they would say that they're segregating data, but how are you getting that guarantee?
Well, I think we should also be really clear that that a lot of LLM companies are not signing that anymore. I'd say that 5 years ago, we used to have the saying that if you're not the client, you're the product. If you're not paying them money, they're harvesting your data. Um, they're As LLMs need more and more data, the large LLM companies are changing their terms of service on people after they sign up. So I know people in the IT space who are paying $200 a month for Claude. And about 2 or 3 months ago, Claude changed all their defaults to allow them to take all information inputted into Claude. And when you're paying $200 a month for Claude, you are putting vast sums of usually highly confidential information into Claude. And if you didn't go in that day and switch it over to switch it back from the to the to not sharing it after they switched the default on you, you were giving all of your data to them, even though you're paying them $200 a month.
Yeah, and this is this is a really, really big issue. And I know that terms of service piece, I know that again, the task force that I'm on, we actually have a project where we're looking at terms of use and terms of service to try and glean kind of how fast that's changing, just to provide some useful information and tools for members of the legal profession, so that you got a better sense of that. So, I mean, these are all, highlighting some very, very real issues and concerns. Um, you know, that does lead to the question or conversation about, well, we have these tools, there's some dangers or hazards in using them, but they really can improve our ability to get work done. So how do you move through navigating the risks that are present in using AI tools? I'm wondering if anyone wants to kind of weigh in with that. Any best practices that you may be thinking about or adopting, what your organizations may be doing to kind of move through that, or key principles.
I I would imagine Angela has a lot of wisdom here, but let me say real quickly, talk to your staff before you go down this path. We started down the path of, to your point about like an HR talk bot, and we may still go down there. But we had neglected to take the first step, which is asking our 120 staff, where do you feel like you are spinning your wheels the most? Like, what bureaucracy internally is stopping you from getting more work done slash enjoying your work? Right? And that now is really leading us down a path differently than when we first started. And of course, I should have known better, right? Like half of our work is asking a client what they need, and we forgot to do that step. So I would caution, like, if you're going to go down this path, like, really think about what your staff or your clients need and talk to them first.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then, I think the other piece, Angela, you were raising is the human factor, right? One of the really critical points is where's there a human in the process?
I'm going to pick up on Michael's point because I was also thinking about it with regard to the question about vendors.
Yeah.
And I think the when I do think a critical first step is talking, like talking to your staff. Where do you think this could be useful? Each staff person is an expert in their own job and their own workflow, and therefore they're the expert in, where are the things that take too long, where are the things that don't really utilize their whole brain, what are the things that they think someone else could do and an AI could possibly do. And that's where you start your innovation. And it doesn't start by a vendor coming to you and saying, here, I've got a tool that does X. Like that may not be useful to you, and you may be like, and if you're like, okay, we do X, let's do X, and then you like try to ram your processes into their tool when it really should be the other way around, that you have a specific problem that you want to solve and you think AI can be a part of that solution, and that's where you begin. And then if there's a off-the-shelf tool that can do that, great. If you need to engage with someone like OpenAI, then maybe that's the answer. I think the other really big piece that I mentioned earlier, but that I will continue to harp on, because it's you need to have staff that know what they're talking about, and you need to give them time and space and resources to learn so that they can give you good guidance. Some of the most sophisticated organizations that I see in legal aid, they use OpenAI. They have a business associate agreement with OpenAI, restricting the use of their data. They have protected health information agreements with OpenAI, even further, like HIPAA protecting their data, and they, have done all of that homework to understand that, and to do the best possible things that you can do to protect confidentiality. Um, and so they need to have the time and the space to learn that and help you make good decisions as an organization. You need to engage, multiple. I think the other thing that I see as programs, they're like, oh, we want to use AI. Let's go see what the IT team says. And that's great for things like business associate agreements. But again, they don't know the workflow of a paralegal. They don't know the rote actions that your what do you call it? Your AP person, the million things that could be automated that your AP people spend, paying all your invoices. And that's where the ideas have to come from. Another important piece specifically for leaders is around having good policies in place and policies that reflect your organization's philosophy. As Michael mentioned, we've heard of other legal programs, having hard conversations, but important conversations with the union about what it means. And even if there's no union, your staff, ununionized staff probably have the same concerns if you talk to them. So having a clear philosophy, having a policy that guides use, but that is flexible enough to withstand the ever-changing universe in which we live, and to after you're innovating, it's as important to do the change management, the staff buy-in, and the training in order to foster adoption of whatever processes or tools you've integrated into your work. So
That's
focusing and giving fair attention to all of those pieces is really important.
that's really great. David, do you have
I
any
think,
additional thoughts on that?
yeah, I think two thoughts. First is um, our our staff's time is extremely valuable, and the issue is that uh, the frontier models, the models at the cutting edge, are so much better than the models that are even 3 to 6 months behind. And those frontier models cost a lot of money. And so what you need to be thinking about it's great if you can allow your staff to have some time to look into these models. But what we regularly find is that um, a, a, a question that was unanswerable by a model 3 to 6 months ago is completely solvable by a frontier model that we pay a good chunk of change for today. And so if you're giving your staff the time, and time is extremely valuable, you should also be trying to figure out whether you can give them the the frontier models as opposed to the ones from 3 to 6 months ago. And the really nice thing is that the frontier models from 3 to 6 months ago are going down in price extremely rapidly. And so what that means is that what as you're experimenting on the frontier models, as you systematize and process that size that over the coming months, you don't have to worry that, oh my gosh, I'm spending $300 a month on API calls today to automate this one tiny part of my process. Um, 6 months from now, that might be down to $30 or $3. Um, I was just commenting to Laura that at our last board meeting that our little AI tool that started out costing us a decent amount of money, and we had a grant for it through Microsoft. We just we transitioned it to a much smaller model. It's a new low cost model, and we're now spending around 18 cents a month is our AI bill.
And
And the
see,
quality has gone up from when we started this a year ago. So that's the first thing I want to say is that like don't just send your people loose on the free chat GPT. You're doing everybody an enormous disservice. Figure out how to give yourself those $20 a month or $200 a month for people to do the research with the real models. The second thing that I wanted to mention along this lines is that in addition to the improving tools, um, the AI companies have been improving the way. So I'm sorry. In addition to the improving models, they're also improving the tooling around the models. And so when we built the AI component for DC refers, a year and a half ago is when I guess we started that process. The only way we could do it was through custom coding, um, because there was no way for us to do a lot of the prompt engineering that we need to do through the tools that were exposed by the AI companies through their user interfaces. But today there are so many. They've provided a lot of different ways for you to modify your the context in which your LLM runs. And so you can think of the context as all the information that the AI has at its disposal. You and you have lots of information in your organization about processes and responsibilities and all this stuff. And if you can make that available to the AI as part of the context when you're asking it other questions, that's how you start to get the really useful answers out of your LLM, as opposed to having to provide a very long question every single time, which is what I saw a lot of people using desktop ChatGPT probably about 2 years ago. You would see people with these copying and pasting in 2 pages or 3 pages of prompt every single time, and then asking their questions, right? And you'd have different prompts. Now with Claude skills and things like that, you can provide all of that at the organization level. And what's really cool is that when you ask a question, Claude will actually load in the skills that it thinks it needs in order to answer the question that you have, right? So if it's an HR question, it can load in the HR skills. And it sounds really fancy, but all it's really doing is it's bringing in a bunch of context into the query before it actually gets to answering the question.
So it might be pulling like from a particular subset of the data information it has that's focused on like landlord tenant issues versus employment law issues
Exactly.
or something.
You could be creating skills for landlord tenant. You could be creating skills for other. I'm not advocating that you do this. I have not done any of this. So, but you can imagine it. I can definitely say you can do it for back office work. That I'm quite confident it works very well. Um, but you don't need to do a bunch of custom work with the vendor. You just create your skills and it starts working.
So what I'm hearing from all of you really is that for any of us that are contemplating using AI tools in our respective workplaces, it's a question of, you know, making sure we've got the right tools that fit the needs, but even more important, to do that assessment and figure out where AI is going to be most useful and most helpful in our day-to-day workflows, and figuring out the best ways that it could really leverage the work that we need to get accomplished. Does that sound about right? Great. I'm going to ask if anyone has questions to please go ahead and pop them in the chat or put your hand up. I'm happy to take calls or questions. Um, you know, I think the other piece on this, you know, Angela, you were mentioning policies, and that's another piece just from an organizational perspective, and whether it's from the management perspective or from the ground up, in other words, from colleagues working together to say, hey, it'd be great to have some framework to kind of figure this out. Having those conversations with your colleagues is really important, I think, too, to figure out, you know, what can you come up with basic parameters of when you're going to use AI. And for example, you might even get as granular to have procedures about like what you use it for and what kind of prompts you may want to use, um, that kind of thing. Do any of you, let's Angela, if I could start with you, if that's okay, do you have a takeaway tip for folks that you'd say, you know, if with this bold new world that we're in and AI is a tool, what's an important thing to be focused on?
Hard to think of just one.
I know there's so many. Well, you can give more than one. I won't.
No, I guess I'll say the thing that I'm thinking a lot about this week with regard to AI is the importance of evaluation and iteration. Again, kind of going back to the public facing chatbot and you know, in legal aid, when we're working with strapped resources, we often say like, well, you know, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You know, this tool is like some information on a computer. It's better than nothing, which is what this person would get anyway. And I mean, that is a very low bar, but it is a bar. And, you know, if you've created a tool that is actually not better than nothing, it's actually doing harm, then you are doing a real disservice to your clients, whoever is seeing your tool, your own reputation, the reputation of all self-help work. And so like the importance of evaluation and iteration is kind of next level with AI because it can do so much and because it's so easy to just trust it, even though we all know that it's filled with nonsense. Um, it is so confident sounding. That if it's on a trusted platform, people are going to trust it. So the importance of very seriously, systematically, methodically evaluating the outputs of your tools using AI, not just the public-facing chatbots, but everything. It's critical to do before you launch. It's critical to keep doing after you launch because, as David said, the new models come out every few days and things are always changing, and the prompt that worked well 2 months ago may not be the prompt, may not be getting you the right answers today. So you need to just have just like you would regularly supervise your paralegal. You don't read one good brief and say, cool, paralegal, I'm never going to read anything else that you write again, I'm just going to sign it. You would never do that. And so you've got to continue evaluating the product of your AI tools regardless of what it's doing.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so it really, really opens up the door for some collaborative conversations with your colleagues to just to really be going through that process and making the time on a regular basis to really evaluate, are we getting the best out of this that we can? Is the tool still working for us? And also evaluating potentially also the tools themselves. Is this tool working for this particular use? Is there a different one that might work better for something else? And really kind of being flexible and creative about trying to figure out what is going to work best. Yeah, that's great. Michael, do you have any kind of last takeaways that you'd recommend for folks?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a couple things. One, to build on what Angela was saying, one of the things that we do to, I'm not sure the word is convince, but continually reinforce with our staff that this is a bad idea, is that we have 2 or 3 prompts that are easy, right? If you asked an immigration attorney, tell me the 2 or 3 basic cases about ineffective assistance of counsel from the Board of Immigration Appeals, they'd be like, oh, Lozado and Melgar. And so we run those through the systems occasionally and through new systems to show this is not giving you good information. Like you all know this off the top of your head. This does not. So that's one of the things that we do and talk to staff about to reinforce this issue. And I think there's an interesting conversation that I've had with a number of my staff on 2 fronts, which is, does this create even more of a gap in society where there are people who can afford an attorney, people who are lucky enough to live in an area where there is a nonprofit that can help them, and everybody else, you all just get AI? And do we end up normalizing this idea that there's basically a caste system for accessing the courts and redress? And that's something we're constantly talking about because, not surprising, there's not enough nonprofit immigration attorneys to help everybody. But to Angela's point, this could also do a lot of damage. So that, and I've never had an AI conversation with staff where the issue of the environmental impact does not come up. So that is something we're constantly talking about as well. So I think there's amazing ability to drive innovation with AI, but to, I think, everybody's point today, like we have to be very careful about how we do it.
Yeah, so not only kind of kicking the tires and testing it every once in a while to make sure that what you're getting as responses are actually useful for what you're doing, but also thinking about having conversations around the the moral and environmental implications, there are a lot of big issues around this. And Angela, I know you started off our conversation kind of pointing that out as well. Not easy questions to kind of move through and address. David, how about you? Do you have any last words of wisdom for us? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, I don't think these are words of wisdom. I think I would just suggest it's very easy, uh, especially with the newer models, because they are getting right answers more often than they were a year ago. To rely on the AI and offload a lot of mental work to the AI, and in the process, uh, you basically lose your perspective. Um, and I think that over the next couple of years, what we're going to have to figure out is how to offload mental work to the LLMs without losing who we are. Um, what so for instance, like I don't have a great writing style, but it's my writing style and it's definitely not default chat GPT. But it is sometimes very useful just to have chat GPT write an email for me that I really don't want to write. um, there are ways that you can provide the context to chat GPT so that it writes much more like I do. And so I have a set of default prompts in there that uh, so when I write an email with ChatGPT, it at least sounds a little bit more like me. Um, and I think, and that's like a very surface level one. I especially find it with the note-taking services, where I'll look at the notes afterwards, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that basically got all the high level points. And then I'll look at my notes, and my notes have completely different. Like there was nothing wrong about it, but my notes have a very different emphasis on what I thought was important. And the really concerning part was that after reading the AI synopsis, I'd forgotten about all that emphasis that was in my notes. And it wasn't until I relooked at my notes that I was like, oh, so that AI had actually completely changed the meaning of that and the importance of that conversation while still being 100% correct. I don't have an answer to that, but
But a very
I
good
do want
point.
people to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the human factor, right? I mean, if you look at folks that have spent a lot of time thinking about the policy implications of AI, I mean, one of the core tenets is something called responsible AI, and in that, the one of the number one issues is human oversight, right? And so, to your point, David, that's on a very micro level. You know, we do have control over how what we're producing. Um, is generated and how it looks and how we're using AI to do our work. And we have a responsibility, not only personally, but quite frankly, I think a lot of the ethics rules are starting to show ethically as well as lawyers to make sure that we are providing that human oversight of our work to make sure that everything is correct and legally sound, and that we're not in the course of our work overstepping any of our other ethical obligations that we have to clients in the court. So, um, so that is really really great point to wrap up with. I'll just kind of open up for any kind of additional comments or questions. I hadn't seen anything appear in the chat or any hands go up. So, just one final call to see if anyone had any questions or comments. What I would love if those of you who are participating today, if you have questions or thoughts or things you'd like to see us focus on, I'm sure the speakers as well as myself would welcome your thoughts and insights or issues that you're finding particularly challenged by, because it helps us to plan for future programs and to also consider articles and things that we can do to really help share information across the legal services community here in DC. So, even if you don't have an opportunity now to pop something in the chat, I am actually going to go ahead um, and put my email in the chat. You're welcome to reach out to me and with any comments or thoughts or questions you may have, and I'm happy to share that with the panel as well.
I'm also putting my chat in because I love talking about this and would welcome conversations anytime.
Perfect. Thank you. And there's much more to come. As David keeps underscoring, this is just the beginning. There's a lot more coming along down the pike. And Angela, it's exciting hearing about all of the incredible things. Michael, thanks for putting your email in. Hearing about all the exciting and interesting things that you're doing, really to help encourage dialogue in the community about ways to innovate with the AI tools. And Michael, of course, your work and how we're seeing this on the ground, and some of the challenges that you're coming up against, and some of the solutions that you've found on a day-to-day basis to help move through those has been really, really helpful. So all of the speakers have put their email in the chat, so you're welcome to email any of us. And once again, I want to thank you all for being with us today and wish you a wonderful fall weekend. And again, thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.